On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being no experience and 10 being way off the charts, how would you describe your level of experience with God? So now that you've picked that number and it's in your mind, why did you pick that number? As you look back over the past, have you seen where that number has changed over the years? Has it went up or has it went down? Right now, is your relationship with God affecting your life as much as you think that it should be? Where are you on the mountain of spiritual progress? Where do you think you're at? Bottom, middle, up at the top? Are you hiking upward? What have you been asked to take out of your backpack? Are you camped out somewhere or walking back down that mountain? Are you ready to do what it takes to experience more of God and to transform your life? We're starting off a brand new series called The Great Divide, and we're going to talk about being camped out right after this. Hey guys, welcome back to another week of Connecting the Gap. This is episode 13 that you've made it to, and I'm so glad that you guys have decided to join me again for another week of discussion and learning here on my podcast. And as I kind of mentioned last week whenever I posted my last video, I want to apologize because I guess some of my videos that I posted on my podcast have been buffering quite a bit. And actually my iHeartRadio was also buffering, which is audio only. I had been uploading those in too good of a quality, and I actually wasn't even at the top quality. I thought it was okay, but it's still a little bit too much, I guess. So I experimented last week, and it seems like everything's working better. So hopefully, if you guys did get a chance to watch last week's, it was fine. Or if you got to listen to it, as far as I could tell, it was okay. So I'm going to go with that setting from now on. And if you guys ever watch some of my podcasts and it seems like we're having some issue with something, please let me know. I don't always go back and watch these after I upload them, so I don't always catch if there's glitches or that kind of thing. So just let me know. But above it all, thank you guys for sticking through it with me. My YouTube channel has tons of stuff on it, and YouTube actually takes the video and works it over. And so I don't never have any trouble with issues on YouTube. So if you do have issue watching the podcast or listening to it, you can always go to YouTube and check it out there, and you shouldn't have any trouble with it at all. So as I've been throwing out there the last couple of weeks, I had a promo that I was letting you guys see, and I kind of pushed it out a few times to kind of get you primed and ready for this week as we start off this new study that I'm going to do. It's called The Great Divide. And whenever I did this study prior, it's been probably 5 years ago. It's actually like one of the very first studies I'd done when we started Altered, the life group that my wife and I and Scotty and Vicky ran at the church that we used to go to. And it's just a phenomenal study, and I decided that I wanted to bring it back and do this again because I know even a lot of the ones that were in Altered back then, some of them are still here and may remember this and may not. But there was a lot of newer ones that came along that never did get to be a part of this study. And I'd like to share it with you guys because it really makes you think. As I opened up today and asked you all those questions and you were sitting there answering those questions in your mind, was you disappointed with your answers that you were coming up with as I was asking those questions? Or do you feel like that maybe you're okay? Maybe you're kind of sitting where you need to be with God. I think that as Christians, we never arrive. We should always be learning. We should always be pushing forward and progressing at everything that we do. But there comes a time in life sometimes as we climb the mountain of life that we kind of get stagnant and we kind of just hang out. And so this week we're going to be talking about camped out. So as I talk about this climbing this mountain scenario, have you ever thought that following Jesus is like climbing a mountain? And I'm going to kind of explain that to you a little bit here of why I look at it that way. You can think of it as a journey of spiritual progression. The analogy might go something like this. Jesus asks us to come and follow him so he can lead us to the abundant life that we all desperately desire. And I think as Christians, whenever we give our lives to Christ, there is a level of expectation that we all kind of expect in that Christian walk. Sometimes we reach that and sometimes we don't. And we can be disappointed in our walk with Christ if we're not careful with how we approach that walk with him. If we say yes to his call, we meet him at the bottom of the mountain to begin our journey. So that's, as a new Christian, we start at the bottom of this mountain. However, we each show up with a heavy backpack. And in this backpack, if you can visualize this, it's filled with a lifetime of fears and sins, insecurities, addictions, comforts, and other hindrances that we have accumulated. We all know that none of us were perfect since we were born. Maybe as a baby we were perfect, but at some point our humanistic ideals came over and took over our very beings, and we became that person with the sinful nature and probably done some things that we shouldn't have, and we come into this life as a Christian with baggage. I have had plenty of baggage in my lifetime that I've had to share. So although that Jesus knows our heavy packs will make it hard to climb, he is a patient guide. So in his love, he looks at us with our huge backpacks and he checks us out and he simply says, okay, let's go. Let's start up this mountain. And so with those words, with the backpack on our back, with all of that junk packed into it that we've brought into this life and probably brought upon ourselves, our journey begins. God's goal is for us to reach the pinnacle of the mountain. At the pinnacle of that mountain, there is a life of freedom, abundance, and fulfillment of our God-given destinies. That's what we're trying to reach as we climb up this mountain of life. And God wants us to have that. He never once wanted us to stay at the bottom of this mountain and never progress forward. He always has a better thing ready for us in our future. Every step that we take with him brings us higher up this mountain. The higher we get, the more we experience God, and the more that we see his promises start to come to pass in our life. As long as we keep pushing forward and we keep striving to dig deeper into his will and what he would have for us, we start seeing the fruits of that as we continue to go up. So as we journey on with the Lord, there's going to be times that we're going to come to places where we can't manage to climb over a rock or squeeze through a crevice. We are unable to continue. That's because of this baggage that we have. If you've ever went on a hike and you came up to a very narrow spot that you're barely big, small enough to fit through just by yourself, that backpack causes extra problem when you try to get through that crevice. At each place like this, we discover that something must be removed from that backpack that we're carrying on our back if we want to continue on with him. We know that we cannot squeeze through that situation in our life with all of this stuff that we're carrying on our back. At that moment when that happens, if we are in tune with Christ and our relationship with him is where it's supposed to be, Jesus will reveal to us what it is that we must part with in order to keep on moving forward. Sometimes we argue with ourselves. We come to these crevices, we come to these stops, these big boulders in the road, and we just can't figure out how to get around those because yes, I need to get rid of this and I need to get rid of that, but man, I kind of like that and I kind of like this. I just can't quite get rid of it all the way. And we kind of have this battle going on in our minds. But Jesus, if we call upon him and ask him, say, Jesus, would you please reveal to me what it is in my life that I need to change to keep moving forward? At that moment, God will come to us and he'll reveal to you in your spirit through convictions of the things that you need to get out of that backpack. If we choose to lay that thing down, we can continue on. We keep climbing beside our guide, drawing ever closer to that peak, that place that we're trying to get to. However, if we say no to moving that out and we're unwilling to move something from our backpack, our progress is going to stall. We know that in order for us to move on in Christ, we have to shed the old man. We have to shed the old woman. We have to take things off of us that Satan has put upon us, and we have to get those off so that we can keep moving forward in the thing that Christ has for us. He simply takes us back around the mountain, and he gives us the same test again if we decide that we don't want to follow him and do what it is that he asks us to do. And sometimes those tests might take days, sometimes they might go into weeks, and sometimes they might go into years. Why is that? It's our own fault. Because if we are not willing to set that thing down and get it out of our backpack, and we go through these times of testing, and all of us go through these testing moments, we wonder why in the world we keep going through the same thing over and over and over and over. This thing that we thought we got rid of a long time ago, here it comes again. And sometimes it takes us so much longer to get out of that funk because we can't bring it within ourselves to understand that we're the ones that need to change, that we're the ones that need to make a difference in our life so that God can use us and move us on forward. So sometimes these tests, as we go around this mountain in the same spot, they get longer and longer. It'll take as long as it takes for us to drop those things out of our backpack. The time will come as we go through this testing when he asks us again to remove that hindrance out of our backpack. Whether we move forward is going to depend on that decision that we're going to make at that time. Are we going to be willing, or will we be resistant to it? And that being the case, our progress up the mountain is going to stop. Jesus, when he comes into our life and transforms us and makes that new person within us, he can only do what we allow him to do. We will move forward as long as we allow him to transform us completely. But if we have any hindrances in our life that we are not willing to get rid of, that progress will stop. When we cling to our heavy burdens, it's almost as if we set up camp on the mountain of spiritual progress. The longer we stay in camp, the more convinced we become that this must be all that there is. We look at the others camped out all around us and reassure ourselves that surely this must be normal Christianity. Besides, we reason, I have made some progress. After all, the view is better here than it was down at the bottom of the mountain. So as we become comfortable with that spot that we're in, and we look around and see other people that has came up to this same roadblock, and they're not moving forward either, we look at the view, we can see the beautiful trees and the lake down there in the valley and all the awesome scenery that we could not see at the bottom because the trees were in our way. So we begin to justify, and we begin to think, they're doing it and they're doing fine. They seem to be happy. It's not everything that I want, but I can be happy with them sitting here in this spot, camped out in this spot on the mountain. Yet all the while, far above our camp, that pinnacle still waits. The abundant life and calling for which God set us apart from the beginning of time. And our guide Jesus, he's eager to lead us there. All Jesus requires is that we trust him and we keep climbing. We cannot stop because those rewards are there so much more than what we have here in this camping spot. But we got to get past our complacency to see that. And we've got to understand that we have to change. However, if we choose to say yes each time that God asks us to remove something from our backpack, we will continue forward. Though at times it may be painful and difficult to remove certain things from our pack, it's the only way to leave camp and continue towards the top of that mountain. What is it in your backpack that you've not ever been able to get rid of? What is it that you're clinging on to? Because maybe it's a deep, dark memory of something in your past that you think that if you let it go, you're just going to let yourself be completely open and transparent before people, and you don't want them to see the true you. But yet it's keeping you from the abundance of Christ and what he has for you in your life. What is that thing that you cannot take out of that backpack that's stopping this forward progress up this mountain? We've got to remember that the further that we journey with him, the more freedom that we're going to experience and the knowledge of God's character we're going to gain. So even though this hindrance is in our backpack and we think that it's something we have to hang on to, we have to understand that if we get rid of that, we have so much more awesome things in store for us that we're never going to see if we can't part with whatever that little piece of our life is that we can't get rid of, that just sits there and gnaws at us and screams at us in the shadows of all the things that we've ever done. We have to get to the point where we can shed those things off. Time after time, our lives confirm that Jesus is a faithful guide. After all, we can see our former campsites down below us. We may be at a spot where we're camped out, but we may have already camped out 2 or 3 other times also. We finally learned our lesson down there at those bottom campsites, and we finally tossed that thing and started moving upwards, but then we came to that other thing that we couldn't get rid of. So we know that we are moving forward because if you look back, you can see the places where you've been and where you've continued to make that forward progress. The higher that we climb, the more evident it becomes that we are no longer the same person that we were when we began that journey. We can look back, I'm sure, I know you guys can see where you started as a Christian. And if you've truly let Christ transform you, you can see how you've changed over time. And you can see the progress that you've made as you've walked this walk, starting up this mountain of life. Because the truth of the matter is, we are being transformed and set free every day to the life that we've always hoped for and scarcely dreamed was even possible. In our own finite minds, we have limits. We have limitations of where we think our life is going to go. And the only way that we can ever get past that and get into the awesomeness of the unknown with Christ is if we understand that as we keep moving forward with Him and we shed these things out of our backpack and get rid of them, whether if it's a relationship that we've been hanging on to, whether if it's a pornography addiction, if it's drugs, if it's alcohol, if it's an anger issue, it does not matter. As we shed them things off, we feel our weight getting lighter on our shoulders as Jesus continues to help us up this mountain and helps carry us through all of these things. And that life that we never thought we could ever have, we can have that. We can have that in Christ if we will allow Him to transform us. So sadly, those pressing towards the peak don't characterize many who call themselves Christians today. Most Christians seem quite content to camp out on the lower slopes of the mountain, only experiencing a fraction of God's goodness and His transformative power. Can you resonate with that? Are you one of those that has called yourself a Christian your whole life, but yet you've never really put your all into it? And so you've not ever really been able to experience much more than what you experienced at the very beginning because you've really not moved forward, but you put on this persona in front of you for other people so that they could think that you're somebody you're not. That's something that we need to think about, because as we walk this life with Christ and we walk up this mountain shedding these things out of our backpack, we are supposed to be becoming a new person. That's the whole point of this Christian walk with Christ. And as I look around with people that I know, and even more so today, I see this pattern everywhere. We have people all over the places that are sheep in wolf's clothing, calling themselves Christians, but yet the life that they're living shows nothing to be biblical whatsoever about where they are, where they've been, or where they're headed. But they want everybody to think that that's what they are, and they claim it. But just because we claim to be a Christian doesn't mean that we are. And that's something that we need to research within our own hearts and see exactly where our transformation level is in our life and what we've allowed God to do for us. So what we're going to do is, my time's about up here. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out for today. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the beginning of this. This is going to be a pretty extensive study. It's just, like I said, it's phenomenal. And I think that it's going to really it's made me think as I went through it. And even the second time through it here, that it's really made me research other areas in my life. I think we should always be open and transparent before Christ, allowing Him to come in and change us to who He wants us to be. The only way that we can do that is for us to live that truly transformed life and keep walking up this mountain, tossing all those things that Satan's laid before us and tries to trip us up. So my prayer to you is that as we go through this study, are you that camper that's hanging out? Are you that camper that is aggressive and likes to keep moving forward? Are you that camper that just can't get rid of anything, and in the process you take on more weight and you actually go back down the mountain? Think about that for the rest of this week. And as we come back next week, we will get into the next section of this study of the Great Divide. Thank you guys for joining me today. And please share my podcast. My blog is up now. So if you go to my website at connectingthegap.net, at the very top there's some links up there. And one of those links is for my blog and my contact information. It'll flip you off to some other pages. And you can see some of my blogs. I've just started doing this, so that's pretty new. I'm going to try to keep that going as well, maybe on a weekly basis, so go check that out. And please share this with anybody that you think this might benefit. I think that us as Christians, a lot of us, even if we feel like we're in a good spot with Christ, I think this is a good thing for us all to go through, just to remind us maybe somewhere in our life where we might be just a little bit complacent, some areas that we need to fix. So you guys have a great week, and I will talk to you next week.
Bye.